Hi, folks. Chuck here again. Back with 5 more books that I think you should definitely read. The Joe Pitt books by Charlie Huston. This one's called Already Dead. There's 5 in the series, and they are terrific. It's basically set in New York City, all of them are, and it's vampires involved in organised crime. Um, it posits that there's this virus that causes vampirism, and people, catch it and become vampires. But it's been around for quite a long time. So there are all these crime families in New York City who have contracted the virus at different times. There are people from, the 19th century. There are people from the 20th century. There are people from the 21st century. There are people from the 1960s, the 1970s, that sort of thing. Joe Pitt, the anti-hero, and that's maybe putting it a bit too nicely of this, is a guy who was a New York punk and, contracted it in a New York nightclub. He's a terrible person. He is a really, really horrible, I was about to say human being, but a really horrible character. But, and this is the same for another book that I'll show you in a moment, he becomes the hero by default because the other people he's dealing with are so much worse than he is. Some of them are nastier. Some of them are more brutal. Some of them are just, evil. I suppose what I would say to anyone reading this is that it's not a book to read if you like your vampires romantic and, blood-sucking to be kind of behind the curtain. It's really brutal. The thing to keep in mind is, think of how brutal the average story about organised crime, about, say, the mafia is, and then imagine how much damage you have to do to a creature like a vampire who can heal from almost any wound. Imagine how much damage you need to do to that person to actually make an impact. And it'll give you an idea of how sometimes over the top and yet realistic the violence and gore in this is. But I love it. I think it's an amazing series and that everyone should read it. So here's the other book I was alluding to, with a very unpleasant protagonist who becomes the hero by default because everyone else is worse. Johann Cabal the Necromancer, by Jonathan L. Howard. There were 5 books in this series. I absolutely love them. They are essentially horror comedy. Think Terry Pratchett's Discworld, but much, much drier and really much nastier in many ways. The central character, Johann Cabal the Necromancer, is a scientist who has had trauma in his background, and he hates people. He just loathes people, and he doesn't necessarily go out of his way to do horrible things to them, but his whole life is his research and his science and, the unholy arts. And if you get in the way, he doesn't give a shit what happens to you. The interesting thing about this series is that each book kind of has a different feel to it. The humor is the same throughout, but each one kind of delves into a different often sub-genre of speculative fiction, whether it's science fiction, fantasy, horror, that sort of thing. This first one is gothic horror, essentially, and there are bits in this that will make your, the hairs stand up on the back of your neck, either side of a good, belly laugh. Other books in the series get into Lovecraftian sort of horror. They get into steampunk, into kind of urban fantasy, those sort of things. It's a really eclectic kind of series of books, but really, really fun and worthwhile. And I wish he would write more of them, quite frankly. And this is a book that I think you should all read, particularly, again, if you like humorous, speculative stuff. So, if you like Terry Pratchett, if you like Tom Holt, if you like Douglas Adams, Robert Rankin, probably quite similar as well, because it's a bit drier than Adams' stuff. All of that sort of stuff. Really, really good stuff. Joe Hill, The Heart-Shaped Box. This, I think this was the first book of his that I read when it first came out. It might have been his short story collection, but this I loved. This is the book that for me made ghosts scary again, after a long time of kind of feeling that ghosts are a bit of old hat. That's probably the best thing I can tell you about it. But yeah, brilliantly written. Joe Hill, of course, is Stephen King's son, but he has a voice absolutely all of his own. So, you can't really accuse him of, uh, you know, taking anything from his dad other than maybe some absolute talent. And he writes a lot of amazing stuff and has produced a lot more stuff since then. But this will, I think, will remain my favourite book of his. It's a terrific ghost / haunted house tale. And oddly enough, again, involving a protagonist who is not necessarily the nicest person on earth, but circumstance does make you kind of flip over to his way of thinking, and he grows throughout this. So yeah, definitely worth a read. Okay, now this is a series I can't remember why I picked up. I think I had met Charlie Higson at an event because he was flogging his Young Bond series. So he does a lot of sort of young adult stuff. But this is a zombie, a sort of an urban zombie series. It's very unique. There's all kinds of different things going on behind the scenes than you would think. It was pitched as young adult. I would say exercise caution if you're giving it to a young adult to read, because it is absolutely brutal. And look, maybe young people can gloss over that a bit more than adults can. But it's basically the zombie outbreak. And not only do all the adults go haywire and start killing each other and kids, and they don't shy away from showing that, but anyone who reaches the age of 13 or 14 inevitably gets the virus and turns into an infected zombie, which is a hideous thing to be hanging over the heads of the survivors. Everyone should have a read of this. It's absolutely fantastic. Brutal, but absolutely fantastic. And there's, I think, 7 books in the series too. So if you love that, there's a lot to go on with. Finally, Harry Harrison is an author that I absolutely love. He seems to be remembered mostly today for his Stainless Steel Rat series. I'm not even sure how popular that is anymore. It was a science fiction over the top comedy series about the galaxy's most slippery criminal who goes out and does jobs and often is on the side of right, but he's still the bad guy and what have you. However, Harrison did write a lot of other stuff. I mean, there's some real staples of science fiction, classic science fiction that he wrote. But this is one that came out in the early 80s, I think it was. And in a subgenre of science fiction that I love but don't often read a lot of, because sometimes I'm not up on what the real history is, it's alternate history. This is a big one, though. I think anyone would be able to enjoy this without necessarily knowing a lot about the dinosaurs, because I think we all know what killed the dinosaurs or what should have done. In this one, it posits that the dinosaurs never died out, and that dinosaurs kept evolving until one branch of them became intelligent and a technological species. Whereas, but in the meantime, on another continent altogether, humans evolved, and then one day the two groups come into contact, and it does not go well for the humans. So yeah, West of Eden, great. It's a great start to a trilogy that describes the journey of one early, by our standards, early human negotiating his way through life, having fallen into the hands of the Yalane, who are the reptile species, and they are really kind of shown to be a very alien species in terms of what we know of species. Their tech is biological rather than mechanical. They think differently. They have different biological processes that actually inform their behaviors and the way they think. It's absolutely fascinating. I would recommend this to not just to anyone, but if you're an author who wants to know about sort of creating non-human species that think differently and act differently, you could do a lot worse than pick up this book and read a really good example of how that's done. Absolutely fantastic. It's one that I sort of used to reread a lot when I had time to reread, and there are, as I say, 3 books in the series. So that's it for this time around. We will certainly do more of those soon. Again, if any of these books you've read and you've got either the same or alternate, opposing views on them being a book that people should read, please drop that comment down below. Are there any books that you think everyone should read? Or at least if people are interested in a particular kind of subgenre of speculative fiction, please drop the comments down below. Maybe it's one that I'll get to. Maybe they're books that I myself should pick up and read. But let me know. I love hearing about that sort of stuff. And we will do another one very soon.